interesting news this week. The acquisition frenzy may be beginning again. From Software parent company Kadokawa has confirmed that Sony has sent it a letter of intent to acquire it. Now, there's a lot of layers to this particular acquisition because obviously from a gaming perspective, we're talking about essentially the acquisition of From Software by PlayStation. But on a media level, this is something quite different. Oliver, what's the story here?
Well, yes. I mean, on the gaming level, to me, because I'm not too familiar with the media angle in this one, but I know a lot of people are possibly upset by this and are taking their frustrations to social media over the prospect of From Games being owned by Sony, and indeed the broader implication, which is that they'd probably not come to Xbox. But I do think that, at least for me, if they were bought by Sony, that could probably mean positive things for their game development, depending on how things are, of course. But kind of just that baseline, getting their games to be configured to hit stable frame rates, good frame rates on consoles, I think that'd be a great thing. I think giving them technical assistance from other studios to make sure they're maximizing at least one fixed console platform would be a great thing. You could even imagine something like co-development on a title, perhaps with a studio like Bluepoint, you might think, where perhaps they move to a different engine or they get assistance in moving their technology forward in a way that's kind of hard to foresee at the moment without some kind of collaboration given From's history there. Unless they were to switch to something like UE5, which would have its own issues, obviously. They could produce another Lords of the Fallen, perhaps. That would not be ideal, in my opinion. But I will admit, I've not played a ton of From Software games, but the one From Software game I did put quite a bit of time into is the Demon's Souls remake on PS5. And I think there it's because they were able to use cutting-edge technology. They were able to hit very good performance, very stable performance. So you look at something like that and you think about what some other project like that could mean for From, and that sounds very, very compelling. You could also see, in this scenario where Sony owns them, you could even see PC releases. I think you'd probably expect to see PC releases. Maybe even day-and-date PC releases, but if not, perhaps on a bit of a delay there. But I don't really see that as a big negative personally. Not a huge negative. I mean, the games on PC, perhaps they're not the most polished to begin with, so maybe a little bit of extra time could help them there. My only real concern here is if From was to do something very From, and ship a title like Elden Ring that really demands like LFC and VRR. Sony does not really support that on the system level, so if you had like a really worst case scenario on top of a bad case scenario in terms of their configurability on consoles, perhaps you'd end up with some really unfortunate situation there. But I mean, for me personally, I would see this as kind of a win. I tend to like exclusive titles when they're handled well and when they're given the time and attention that they so often are, which sometimes I think you don't see sometimes with these big third-party titles. Sometimes you do see it with those exclusives. And I think in this case, perhaps the expertise of a company like Sony and their various first-party studios could be helpful in achieving the kind of thing that is thus far largely eluded from, at least in the modern history of From, in terms of hitting really good performance targets with brand new kind of cutting edge games on consoles and on PC. I think that's something that's eluded them. So perhaps this would be a helpful development in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's worth pointing out that this deal does encompass much more than games, potentially, assuming it goes through. I mean, they own, just reading the Video Games Chronicle news story on this, they own Dwango, a Japanese telecoms and media company that owns developer Spike Chunsoft, most recently responsible for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Earlier this year, it bought Acquire, the Tokyo studio known in recent years for Octopath Traveler 2, and Mario and Luigi Brothership. And obviously Sony owns Crunchyroll, so there's a lot of sort of anime-related media that's would potentially be part of this deal, which may actually be the focus, who knows. But let's talk about the gaming, Alex. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I would say it would be less than ideal if it meant, obviously, no Xbox version of some sort of From Software game for those players. I mean, I'm not an Xbox player, but there's already a deficit of Japanese titles on the console in comparison to PC and as well as on Sony consoles, where it's more of like an afterthought. Usually, if there is Japanese developed games there, I feel in comparison, and that is a stigma that has been there for a long, long time. And losing another developer, where I think it was actually a great win back in the day that Dark Souls came to Xbox 360, which at the time was the more popular console, and that really popularized the game. The first time I ever saw the game running was on an Xbox 360. Some guy just showed it off to me. He's like, "You got to try this." I was like, "Okay." I saw that it ran really poorly, is what Oliver was saying, but I was also mesmerized with just the first level's design, and the Firelink Shrine thereafter. Yeah, so that would be actually, I think, a loss. I'm always going to say we want to have more multi-platform titles. That's my personal stake in this. But From Software, it has a just terrible technology record. Sony produced games typically are pretty good. They're not perfect always for smaller published titles. Their PC track record is, for me, mixed. There's things that I've liked about Sony published titles on PC, but there's also been things like your Sackboys, your T-Loops, the generic state of some Nixie's titles on release too have annoyed me. And so this doesn't, to me, guarantee a level of, from a PC player's perspective, a level of like stewardship, technological stewardship that I would always approve of. And I'm not sure, honestly, if From Software would ever switch their technology. They seem very insular and almost like they do not react to outside stimuli from especially English-speaking audiences. Very rarely. I was genuinely hugely shocked when they announced Dark Souls for PC back in the day. And I was also genuinely shocked where it was around Dark Souls 2's times where they said Dark Souls 2 was lead on PC, and that was actually a title where you could see it. It still had issues, but it was way better than the PS360 version. But ever since then, they've kind of like floated in this odd area where their PC releases are kind of terrible in a lot of ways. And I don't think their console releases have been very good either. Just looking at Elden Ring, I still don't think it is in a good place where it should and could be, all things considered. Maybe Sony could help with that, but I wouldn't say it is a guarantee because they're such a weirdly insular company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of odd, but every time a new console comes along that says it's going to improve the performance of games of the prior system, the first thing you do is go for a From Software game to see how much of an improvement it actually is. Typically has an unlocked frame rate, always has issues meeting the frame rate target. So, you have to basically wait for a new console to come along to actually get it into a decent enough state. And it's even sort of remarkable that Elden Ring still doesn't run at 60 frames per second on PlayStation 5 Pro.
Remarkable.
But yeah, in theory, you would hope that if there was some sort of Sony acquisition, that the talents of the whole group could be brought to bear. In practice, though, that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. And, if From Software are happy with their engine and not particularly interested in improving technical performance, it's going to be really difficult to actually change that. So I guess it's just watch this space at this point, really.
Oh, maybe what needs to happen is From needs to spend 4 or 5 years developing a game. Then they need to put it on the shelf, hand it to Bluepoint, and then they can spend another 3 years remastering it and rebuilding it. Then we can get the game.
7-year dev title. That makes sense, actually.
We can get the Demon's Souls remake version of whatever their next title will be. Maybe that's the solution.
I'm not sure that is a solution, but it's a hilarious conceit. Yeah, I don't know what to make of all this. I just think that the concept that these games could actually arrive on fewer platforms is probably not a good idea, not great. But, that's part and parcel of what acquisition is all about these days, unfortunately. And obviously, maybe if Sony did own From Software, whatever the contractual stuff that is preventing any kind of Bloodborne upgrade from happening could actually be resolved. That would be kind of nuts, wouldn't it?